Well, trust needs to be restored. Let's begin there.
Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young.
As of this morning, I saw that Gallup just did a poll, and only 10% of the American people currently trust Congress. And if, you consult with your friends, listen to your neighbors, that feels about right, honestly. People are really down on Congress, down on our federal government more generally. I think 17% of the American people trust our federal government. It's not always been this way. Historically, especially post-World War II, there was a lot of trust in our elected officials. And listen, there are a lot of reasons for that. That was before social media. That was before all kinds of things. But I do have to say, sometimes we're just we undermine our credibility in millions of different ways. And one of the ways we do so is oftentimes we have a member of Congress who does something highly inappropriate and only in furtherance of their own self-interest. Among the things we will see is outright corruption, stealing from the public fisc, or engaging in fraudulent behavior, or trading stocks using information that no other Americans really have access to, something we learn in the course of our official duties. And we need to crack down on that. It just strikes me as this is a real opportunity to do something that is obvious.
We heard support for this at the State of the Union. I think the president noted that even Democrats were on board. Have you had any conversations, and I guess you don't have to reveal any names unless you want to, with people in Congress who don't want to ban stock trading among members who, oh, you have. So what have those conversations been like? Do they admit, well, my portfolio would take a hit? Do they say that? Oh, okay. What else do they say?
Not quite that. Not quite that. It's not that brazen. And I think, listen, so many members of Congress, like other people, it's human nature, engage in self-delusion. So they will, these tend to be wealthier members of Congress, candidly. Members of Congress who have very healthy portfolios. And their argument is, hey, I found success in life, financial success. We need people like me in government. The American people need people like me in government. And their argument would be the last thing we need is a disincentive for talented, financially successful people to enter government. And maybe on first blush that makes some sense, but then you look at the voting records of these very same members of Congress. They have supported stopping regular members of Congress from getting their salaries during shutdowns. They generally, and I'm generalizing, tend to be the most vocal members of Congress when it comes to no cost of living adjustment for members of Congress. Of course, that doesn't hurt a very wealthy person. That tends to disproportionately impact members of Congress who are of more middle class origins, right? Then what I've heard from other members of Congress who will say, "Listen, I could go along with banning stock trading, but just make sure it doesn't cover my spouse, because that would be unfair to her ability to trade stocks, or his ability to trade stocks." And when you think about that, I mean, it's you never want to read too much into someone's answer, but is it possible that information is being shared from one spouse to another so that more informed stock trading can occur within the family? I think it's very possible. And what I learned back at the Naval Academy, reinforced in the U.S. Marine Corps, and what I teach my children, is people who are in positions of public trust not only should avoid impropriety, we should avoid the appearance of impropriety. And this stinks. This just stinks. And we can put a stop to this by banning stock trading by members of Congress, their spouses, and their dependent children. And that's as far as I think we should go. And then I think there should be fairly stiff penalties for violating this.
If a stock trade ban took effect, what do you see as the potential downstream effects of this?
I doubt we're going to see people leaving because they can no longer insider trade with non-public information. So I don't think we're going to lose the talent. But if we ever lost someone because they wanted to continue to trade illicitly, or because 175 grand a year wasn't enough for them to serve the American people in this privileged position, to have this honor of serving their constituents, we don't want them, right? It could be a weeding out mechanism. So I think that could be a downstream effect, losing some really bad apples. Another downstream effect, and this is the most important one, is we restore respect of the American people at least a little bit. At least among those 86% of the American people who think we should take this step today. This is an obvious step at a time when at 10% approval rating, we should be looking for ways to, it's not just about us, not about my personal stature in this position. I'm actually quite proud of the perception I have of folks back home who are familiar with my record and have come to know me. But I'm concerned about the institution of government. I'm concerned more generally about self-government. It's not working in various ways. This experiment in self-government is not a self-perpetuating thing. The Founding Fathers understood how fragile it was and how frustrating it can be to have these divergent views and these extended debates and a bit of inefficiency like baked into our system by design through checks and balances. All of that requires maintenance and public trust to be conveyed to the next generation. And we don't want to undermine the amount of trust that still exists in the system by these foot faults.
So what's the holdup? Has somebody introduced legislation? And where are we going with this and when?
Well, members of Congress, and this is not confined to the current generation, it really goes back almost from the beginning of our system, they tend not to act quickly. They tend not to act boldly unless there is first public opinion on the side of a particular position, clear public opinion, which needs to be vocalized. The American people need to say, we want this done. We know there's a war going on overseas. We know that our border needs to continue to be made secure. We know all these other things need to, affordability needs to be prioritized. But we also want you to tackle this other thing. Add this to your short list because, members only have so much time and attention, and we have to prioritize the things that we handle up here. And so we need to hear from the American people.
Speaking of trust, I just want you to weigh in on what we see going on in the House. You served in the House. We're seeing resignations over misconduct. We're seeing resignations before a House Ethics Committee can weigh in on punishment. We're seeing a back and forth between two Republicans making the case that each should be expelled. Speaker Johnson said last week the House Ethics Committee is working around the clock on investigating members' misdeeds or potential misdeeds. What is going on?
We don't talk a lot these days publicly about virtue. There's been such emphasis over the years about not judging one another and not imposing one's own morality or ethics on another that I candidly think we've gone overboard. The whole notion of a small d democratic system, of a republic, of people who form and have control over a government requires making judgments about who should and should not be serving in positions of public trust, judgments about what constitutes acceptable and unacceptable behavior, judgments about what constitutes wise and unwise governance. And if we refuse to judge, you're not doing your job as a citizen. So we need to judge what constitutes really bad behavior among our elected officials. We need to judge it harshly, and then we need to hold and be seen holding bad members of Congress accountable for their unethical and, in some cases, illegal behavior. unless we do that, unless we make an example of the worst actors, then it's going to we're going to keep seeing this happen. My preference is to change the parameters legally about what constitutes wrong behavior. So it's crystal clear on stock trading. There may be other areas that we need to dive into. But rather than looking at all the problems and challenges we have around the country right now, members of Congress should look at themselves and say, let's tend to our own institution. Let's optimize this as we deal with the other challenges facing the country. And I think along the way, we'll discover that our respect among the American people is elevated at a time when it definitely needs some attention.
When it comes to shutdowns, do you think there's a will to end them? I know there's proposed legislation, but it seems like each party likes to use a shutdown as a leverage point, and we keep losing money in the process. It's starting to really seem, for lack of a better word, sort of dumb. Like if we're losing GDP, what are we doing?
Right. Yeah, you get the shutdowns cost us money, threats to default on our debt, during the debt ceilings, can actually increase our interest payments and increase our debt, which is ironic, because oftentimes these conversations emerge out of concerns about our fiscal circumstances. So there's a lot of unconstructive behavior around here. But here again, we the people control the government. So when people want the madness to stop, it will stop. They should insist that we make government work. We make some principled compromises consistent with your values, but most things we deal with up here are not binary. They lend themselves to some principled compromises so that we can move on to the next thing. And we need to change the rules, banning stock trading from members of Congress so that they're not benefiting from information they glean through their official meetings or official status is perhaps the most obvious. But there are all kinds of other things we should be dealing with up here. Not putting together, countless social media videos and saying all sorts of provocative things so that the number of likes you have increases, so that your followers increase. This sort of behavior strikes me as it kind of debases the office that you're asked to hold, and I think competence is something that increasingly is going to be demanded of members of Congress.
Indiana Senator Todd Young, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.